Good evening and welcome to City Focus. I'm Marty Olsen, your host, and tonight we're in for a post-election special edition of the program, and I'm delighted to have in as my guest the chairman of the New London Republican Town Committee, my friend and yours, John Martin. John, welcome back to the program.
Thanks, Marty. Thanks, everybody. It's great to be here tonight. Busy day yesterday. You were busy counting votes. I was busy, waving signs and making phone calls and then preparing for tonight, watching the returns and trying to get everything going. And we got a lot to talk about, brother.
I'm excited. At the national level, I think for most it exceeded expectations. And not just at the presidential level, but we've got the House and Senate, and the impact having all of this in terms of Trump able to put together a team, appointing of judges, Supreme Court judges. A lot of things have fallen into place here, and if the GOP in the legislative body doesn't act stupid, he should have the things in place to have an extraordinary period at the helm.
Yeah, I agree. I absolutely will honestly admit, I thought it was going to be close. I expected him to win, but I surely didn't expect. It was if you look at the electoral map in 2016 and the electoral map here in 2024, I mean it's like identical. I teach human geography among other classes. And I had my girls were looking at the electoral college maps and trying to apply, how can we look at regionalization to, understand why people voted the way they voted. Why are there blocks of blue in the Northeast? Why is the West Coast blue? What happened between 2020 and 2024 to change the blue wall, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. And the girls were, my students were, I teach in an all-girls Catholic school, so I call them my girls. My students were just like, they just got into it. And they're not terribly political, but this whole thing fascinated them.
This is a high school, correct?
This is a high school, yep. It's an all-girls Catholic high school. So I even had some of my students picking apart some of the things that happened. But I was surprised that Trump not only won the Electoral College, which I kind of expected. I didn't think it was going to be by a massive margin. By the time the last few states' results trickle in, unless they already have and I missed it, he's probably going to hit 300 Electoral College votes, and which is huge. And he won the popular vote by, at last count, by a little over 5 million. Which is also huge. So
I was not expecting that because
no.
The GOP has not had a popular vote win in decades.
A long time.
Decades, but it's amazing in that over the last 10 years, and even more so since the end of 2020, everything that the Democrats have thrown at this guy has done nothing but to enhance his standing.
That's exactly right. I spent a lot of time last night, because I wanted to stay up and see what the returns were, and share the information with, like Mastriani's people and Scheinbaum's people, and see, what was going on in the second congressional and what's going to happen, what was happening in the state in our General Assembly races. And so I did a lot of thinking. I took a lot of notes. And the Republicans, for the first time in a long time, did a lot of things right. And, Trump used a very effective campaign strategy. And instead of, he focused in on a lot of key issues, and he kind of dialed back his bombastic, over-the-top persona. And, he tried to connect with people the way he always has been able
to. He does in real life.
Yeah, we were talking before the show started on like people who meet Donald Trump, and I haven't, but I know people who have, will sit there and say he's genuinely interested in you when he's having a discussion. He goes into barbershops and McDonald's and bodegas and talks to people and treats them with dignity, courtesy, and respect, and which is totally different than what a lot of us see on air, which is kind of exciting.
But on air, he's a celebrity. I mean, and he's a marketing, I'll say, genius. I mean, the guy is terrific. He knows when he's on the air, he knows what he's doing. When he comes into a room, he commands it. And he's there, and he kind of sucks the air out of the room for everybody else.
And for the most part, I agree with you. Sometimes he gets a little over the top, and
sometimes.
But I've seen him in 2024. He really dialed back a lot of that, and and it showed. I mean, he picked up support from demographics I never expected to see him, pick up support from, and he also kept bringing things back to listen, do you have more money in the bank than you did 4 years ago? Can you afford your groceries? Can you fill your gas tank? Are you worried about heating your home this winter? He said, you didn't worry about any of these things 4 years ago. What did they do for you in the past 4 years? And by staying on message and talking policy and not, because frankly, at first I thought the idea of, baiting him was going to work. I mean, with this nonsense about, he's a fascist, he's a dictator, he's a Mussolini, he's a Hitler, and he just really ignored a lot of that, which was brilliant.
Well, I also think that the Democrats' use of that really lowbrow level of attacks had a negative effect for them. I mean, people just dismissed it as, you have nothing else to say. Is this the best you can do?
Not in Connecticut, not in the Northeast in general.
I mean, Connecticut's its own little echo chamber, and New London is kind of on a hypersensitive in that area. But in the broader scale, painting with a broader brush across the country.
I think many people were tired of that message, and especially because when we sit down and we look at like the Democrats, they didn't have that cohesive messaging. They didn't stay on target. I mean, at first, Harris and Waltz are going on about how great things are in America and how inflation is going down, and people are earning more and more jobs are available, and the reality of it is people are sitting there saying, I can't afford a vacation this year because I can barely afford my groceries. And can't you understand that? And frankly, this was a message that...
Well, the elites they're just out of touch.
Well, and the crazy thing about it is that this is a message that went all the way down the line. I mean, you heard this from Chris Murphy. You heard this from Joe Courtney. You heard this from Martha Marks. And you heard this from, Tony Nolan. And you heard this from, all of these, the entire Democratic Party, right down to the district and municipal levels.
To the machine tenders.
They're messaging that, listen, what are you complaining about? Things are great. And if you don't, we're the ones who take care of you, and which is, I'm sorry, it's a lie. They, nationally, they also missed a lot of key issues. Harris diverted a lot about, issues, once again, going back to the economy, going back to jobs, going back to, listen, I mean, when Donald Trump left, Israel and Palestine were playing nice. I mean, Ukraine
he just had the Abraham Accords.
Yeah, I mean, Russia and Ukraine were playing nice. North Korea was playing nice. China hadn't made any squawks about Taiwan in a long time. But now, and I'm going to be honest with you, I'm actually kind of concerned about what's going to happen between November and January, inaugural day.
Yeah, well, Rob Simmons has articulated that on Lee Elsey's program the last couple of weeks, is that as a country, we really at our weakest point.
Yeah, this is a danger zone.
Where we are right now, where you've got a feeble, intellectually incapacitated guy at the helm, we're weak. Mm-hmm. And if our adversaries are so inclined to exploit it, this is a time to do so. And I don't want to be over dramatic, but it's look what's going on now anyway.
Mm-hmm. It's Iran is making noises. We haven't heard much from North Korea besides some missile testing, which is always.
Well, they're sending weapons to.
But they
to
are
Russia.
sending weapons and troops to support Russia. So I mean, these are concerns. There's a mixed message and on the national level, going back to where the Democrats messed up. When I was doing research for this, I heard Kamala Harris speaking to a Jewish group in Philadelphia. We support Israel. We support Israel. And then talking to a largely Muslim audience in Michigan, saying, Hamas is trying to save the Palestinian people, and when I'm elected, we will ensure that they have sovereignty, and they have this, and they have that. You can't do it. What did Trump sit there and say when whatever anybody asked him, how are you going to handle Israel and Gaza? I'm going to stop the war. How are you going to end Ukraine and Russia? I'm going to stop the war. And I'm not quite sure how he's planning on stopping the war, but
well, I can believe that you'll see him get in the room with a Netanyahu.
Bingo. And whoever takes over
Turkey.
Hamas.
I mean, and not be double talking him as the Blinken and the Biden administration has been doing.
Yeah, I mean, he brought peace to the Middle East once, and but I think he will go in there and negotiate. He's going to sit there and say, "Listen, we're not going to. The United States isn't going to get drawn into this," and we're making it clear. And I'm the president of the United States. I'm not the shepherd of the world, so I'm going to be taking care of my nation and our interests. And the Democrats their message was muddy across the board, and they really didn't engage anybody.
Yeah. Well, their constituencies are so fractured, and they play identity politics.
Yeah.
I mean, when you are kowtowing to Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib and their anti-Americanism and anti-Semitism, it's kind of hard to go to Israel and say, I support you.
Yeah.
And the squad in general.
Yeah, I mean, it's the big tent party is kind of turned into, like a funhouse mirror when all the mirrors are broken. There's no order to it anymore. I truly believe that the Democratic Party really messed up when they didn't, because they knew that they're going to listen. You tell me that the Obamas and that the Clintons and that Pelosi and Schumer and the other leaders of the Democratic National Committee, you tell me that they were going to let Joe run. Tell me they were going to let Joe run. There's no way in heaven and earth they're going to let Joe Biden run.
Well, if he got by that debate, they would have.
It's maybe. I think the writing was on the wall before then.
He was incapacitated the entire term, as far as I'm concerned.
It's I honestly I couldn't imagine him lasting 4 more years, but they should have allowed an open primary. Why didn't they allow an open primary? Who else do they have in the stable besides Kamala Harris? I mean, Kamala Harris is the only. I mean, Gavin Newsom's not interested. All right, Shapiro's not interested. Who else do the Democrats have who have national stature? I mean, my goodness, they went to Waltz. Who ever heard of Waltz, for heaven's sakes? So they, don't forget, when Harris ran in the Democratic primary against Joe Biden, she dropped out with less than 4%
But she shredded him on a debate stage.
She did.
As a racist, as he is.
Yeah.
Quite frankly, I mean, how he's gotten away with that is mind-boggling. Where his best drinking buddy in the Senate is Robert Byrd.
Yeah, absolutely.
Who's the the head of the KKK, and the national media just gives that a pass.
Yeah, it's I think that I think you're seeing the ending of a lot of things that could be very good for us. I think you're going to see the stranglehold that people call it the legacy media or state media. The fourth estate really hasn't been a fourth estate for a while. I didn't jot down the numbers, and I'm kicking myself for that now. But one of the more creative pollsters had been doing some exit polling for quite some time and said, where are you getting your news that helped you shape the decision on who you're voting for? Especially among the young people. And by young, I mean like 30 and under, 35 and under.
I'm sure it's not the CBS News.
Marty? X. Used to be called Twitter. Podcast. Joe Rogan. How many millions of subscribers does this guy have? Legacy media, your CNNs, your MSNBCs, even Fox, are going by the wayside. The day newspaper. Going by, I still get the digital version of the day because I'm, the RTC guy, so I kind of got to know what's going on in the town and in the area. And also, too, I teach history and government and other social sciences, so I need the local news.
Yeah, well, and I get the electronic version as well of the day. And I've been doing that now for probably 4 or 5 years to at least keep a finger on the pulse of what the public's getting at that level, which is, for many, their primary source of information. And as one who has served in local government, that's only scratching the surface, but that's what the public is seeing.
But that's changing. Because I think that you're seeing alternative media, alternative news, if you will. That's really, this election proved, because I think that Donald Trump on social media probably did more for him than the money he spent on commercials. I think Elon Musk and their interviews, Joe Rogan when he interviewed Trump, just Monday, the day before the election, Joe Rogan, I guess, had a hissy fit because he had invited Harris several times to I'll let Trump was on my show, why don't you come on? And the campaign said, no, we're not going to do that, and that offended Rogan. So for that, I think that might have been part of the reason why on Monday, when he was talking to Musk, he said, yes, by the way, I did just endorse Donald Trump for president, and I encourage all my subscribers to vote for Donald Trump if you haven't already voted in early elections. And can we get to that? Can we kind of jump around a little bit and talk about early?
Listen, we always jump around. So don't start being shy now.
I'm not, but it's like this is the teacher in me. I had my lesson plan all set. But, early elections, I'm a fan. And I didn't think I would be. Absentee ballots, I despise the idea of an absentee ballot unless, unless there's those, 5 or 6 legitimate reasons, health, infirmity, inability to, secure transportation, you're in college or you're in Germany or Kuwait or you're sick or wherever. I think those handful of conditions it's perfectly acceptable to have an absentee ballot. But absentee ballots for everybody, I think is, insane. Just because I don't, just mail me my ballot. Oh no. But early voting, I would cut it down. I would give it like maybe 5 days of early voting. And having hung out, because Tuesday I spent some time in some of the polling places in New London, and the traffic was never really huge.
Well, I can tell you, I had experience with that on 2 levels. One is on the 24th of October.
Mm-hmm.
I was the moderator at City Hall for the early voting.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a relatively smooth environment. You'd come in, whether you came in the front or the back door, you would check in, and then you would go to the next station and sign and date your ballot, or the envelope, excuse me. Then you'd go over and see the ballot, folks, and they'd give you your ballot, and then you would go and vote, and then you would put your ballot in your envelope, seal it, bring it into the next station, and put it into a box.
With your precinct.
For the district that you were voting in.
Yeah.
And that moves smoothly. And the thing that I paid attention to was how are people responding to it?
Yes.
How were the customers, you might say?
Mm-hmm.
And I would say, for the most part, those who did were very excited about it. They liked the idea. And I had my reservations. But I have to say that the customers liked it, the electorate. There are those traditionalists, of which I like to consider myself, although I did vote early, I might add, I'll get into that in a moment, is that you had a choice.
Yeah.
And if situations changed and you knew that, geez, I'm going to be out of town that day, or if you think that, geez, I'm not feeling well, or if maybe you haven't been feeling well and you weren't going to really get out and it was too late to get an absentee ballot, that your franchise was not going to be taken away from you.
Yeah, I mean, on election day yesterday, my wife had a full load of things on her plate, and so her choice is to try to sneak in, when the ballots first opened up on Tuesday, and hope that there wasn't going to be a line, or not vote. But because we had early voting, last Tuesday, not yesterday, but the week before, I took my wife. We went to City Hall. Had a very pleasant experience. Everybody there was courteous and respectful and helpful. The line was very short. I mean, we were in and out of there in 10 minutes. Everybody, the people voting were happy. Everybody was cordial. There was no grumbling because, let's face it, I mean, the lines aren't usually too long in New London because sadly far too New Londoners bother to vote. But after a while, if the weather's not nice and it's November, I mean, people do get cranky and grumbly and impatient. But I mean, yeah, everybody was polite. The line moved fast. It was barely even a line.
It was never the day that I was working. There were periods where it was busy but steady, no line out the door or around the block ever. At least the day that I worked. And I was, again, paying attention to what's going on so you can evaluate things for addressing things in the future. And another thing, most of the folks that came in that day to vote were coming from districts 1 and 2, which is basically from Conn College, Coast Guard, Quaker Hill, Waterford line, down to about Plant Street. Most.
Yeah.
We had 271 the day that I worked. And we had 31 from the south end of the city down by Ocean Beach.
Right.
So, I mean, the folks at the beach who are perhaps a bit more affluent, a bit more mobile, they weren't as
concerned.
Correct.
And, it's easier to go to Nathan Hale and vote for them, and which is fine. I'm not saying get rid of Election Day on Tuesday, but I am saying that I think, and I think I was speaking with, New London's very own Rob Pero about this not too long ago, and I said, so how's it going? And he says, well, people love it. I mean, it's a lot more work, but it's worth it. Because I think we're getting more people voting. It just shouldn't be this long, though.
Yeah. Well, the another thing is that it's from the state, because it's a state law.
Yep.
It was an unfunded mandate, so all the communities had to pay for all this, pay for all the poll workers every day.
And
so it's expensive.
although the night I went, it sounded like, at least I was talking to, there were a couple of younger people, and it seemed like they're either doing volunteer work or community service. So I'm wondering if they,
Well,
hopefully,
there may have been. There were some high school kids the day that I was here, but they weren't there all day.
no.
And you needed to have the paid workers there.
All,
I
yeah,
think
you
by
need,
law.
yeah, by law you did. But, next election, we have early voting again. You New London high school students and Waterford students over in your town of Waterford, your high school guys and gals who need community service hours, not a bad way to pick a few up. And,
But one of the things, and this just is a quick tangent, because there have been movements in New London in particular over the last 5 to 10 years, driven primarily by Councilor Efren Dominguez, that we need more polling stations because we have people who can't get around. And I would say that the early voting has belied that he's full of it.
I absolutely agree. If we had five to 7 days of early voting, so we had a week, voting week, election week.
Yeah.
I think it's manageable. I don't think it's going to put too much strain on the municipal budget, and I think it gives enough of flexibility. So, listen, I mean, in the past, I've had neighbors, hey, Lisa and I are going to go vote. Do you need a ride? You want to take a walk with us? It's people in church. When my wife and I went to St. Joseph's Church, I'd hear parishioners sitting there saying, oh, are you going to pick up so and so, so we can go and vote? If you had a whole week to do that, it'd be so much easier. And not only that, why not use? We do have some perfectly good city buses.
They got the smart ride that they're.
So why not dedicate some of those for election week, and Mr. Dominguez is once again looking well, and I think he's probably a fan of absentee ballots for all.
Yeah, he panders at. That's I think his strength is pandering.
And let's start hopping onto, because this was a question that I kicked myself. I was mentioning earlier. I kicked myself we didn't talk about the last time I was on the show, because frankly it wasn't on my radar. But I wish I did, because it's a huge question. I wonder how many people, all right, those of you who are watching the show now or later, raise your hand if you voted yes thinking this was a good thing. It's not, and let us tell you why. In the state of Connecticut, there's 6, I believe, conditions where you can ask for an absentee ballot to be mailed to you. Things like illness, I'm away at college, I want to vote in New London, but I'm temporarily assigned to Germany or wherever, I'm out of state on business or whatever.
Medical issue.
Medical issue. So there are several conditions where you've always been able to get an absentee ballot. But about 20 some odd states over the past couple of years since COVID have passed legislation to make absentee ballots for no excuse. If this General Assembly votes on this, and I'm sure they will, because the Democrats are going to be controlling the new General Assembly like they aren't already, they're going to make. You can just sit there and say, give me an absentee ballot. I think there's 7 states right now in the nation that actually automatically send everybody an absentee ballot. California, I can't remember the other states off of the top of my head, but California is one, not surprising. Also, too, California has had several voter fraud issues.
Well, between absentee balloting and even the early voting, which the two of us are both kind of discussing it in very glowing terms, you've had, even in staid Stonington, problems.
Yeah.
And as long as we have the poster child for problems here in Connecticut, known as Bridgeport.
Bingo.
I mean, there's always that raises that concern that is this on the up and up?
Yeah. 2019, 2020, 2023, 2024, Bridgeport had absentee ballot issues. Voter fraud issues, lost ballots. In 2023, surveillance footage showed people dumping what turned out to be fraudulent ballots. In 2024, we had greater oversight, but also too, the state of Connecticut felt compelled to provide fire suppression systems for ballot boxes, because absentee ballot drop boxes, because in a couple of other states, I mean, arsonists were setting them on fire.
In the Pacific Northwest,
Yes,
in
Washington and Oregon.
And Oregon, right.
So, I mean, it's, so let's get rid of this. I mean, listen, if you're sick, fine. If you're in the hospital, absolutely. If you're if you can't travel, that's what absentee ballots are for. But, I mean, you have any idea what's going to happen if everybody in Connecticut automatically gets an absentee ballot sent to them? I mean, how many people are just going to dump that in the trash? How many people are going to dump that in the recycling? And how many people are going to harvest that off of the sidewalk?
Who knows who's got it, who's voting, how many times?
And exactly. And, I'd hate for somebody to, get an absentee ballot, because if it's sent to you automatically, you get your absentee ballot and you just throw it out. Or you're going to get somebody who's going to raid your mailbox and then fill it in for you, and then drop it in that ballot box, and then you go to vote on election day, Marty Olsen, and they say, well, Marty, you already voted. So, I mean, I don't know, I didn't ask Rob this, but I'd like to think that if you showed up on election day and said, hello, no, I didn't send in an absentee ballot.
Even now, if you have sent in an absentee ballot and you decide to show
Change
up,
it?
you can come up and vote in person.
There you go.
But you have to, one thing it's required now with an absentee ballot is that you have to request it.
Yeah.
We're not mailing them out to everybody or randomly, and that's a key point.
Yeah, I think if we send them out, to everybody, I think we're in big trouble. Here's the deal. In New London, we had 6,500 registered Democrats. We have 2,800 registered Republicans. Out of all of those, about 70% from both parties actually voted. Voter turnout yesterday for Democrats is about 4,500. Voter turnout for Republicans was surprising at 1,900. And that really surprised me. Last year's election, what did we have? 340 Republicans who bothered to vote.
And a municipal.
Yeah, and it was a municipal election. And granted, a lot of people don't do that. They don't show up and vote on municipal elections. And I'm sorry, I'm probably not supposed to say this because I'm the RTC chair and I'm supposed to be all warm and huggy. But, I mean, Democrat, Republican, Independent, if you've registered to vote and you don't vote, shame on you. Shame on you. I mean, they made it so easy. And it's just like when I lived in a house with a bunch of guys when I was in college. And you'd always get the guys, hey, I'm going to go vote. I'll give you a ride. Matter of fact, we'll stop up at the bar. First beer's on me. I'll buy a round for everybody who goes votes with me. I'd get 2-3 guys who might get, okay, I'll vote for a beer. But the rest of the guys, the other 6 guys, nah. And then they're the ones that scream the loudest when the guy they didn't want or the girl they didn't want didn't win. I mean, no, excuse me, shut up. Yeah. You know, I used to tell my roommates.
You've got to, as a candidate, you've got to get your vote out.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a driver.
Which brings us to things like in Connecticut, where we had really bad turnouts, and some really disappointing ones. The Republicans did not do well in Connecticut as a whole. And locally, I mean, I think we had where we lost some good candidates lost. We'll talk like Sean Mastriani. How did Martha Marks beat Sean Mastriani? Little bit of research. For better or worse, everybody knows Martha, and she did a pretty decent job when she was out talking to her base. This is why I run. I'm here for reproductive rights. I'm here for protecting the working families.
She was not getting crossover votes. I mean, she would get Democratic votes, period.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, I think a number of people also would cross party lines on that alone, where so many folks would get on whatever party, Democrat or Republican, and stay there. There'd be a handful that would break off and vote for Sean Mastriani, but obviously not nearly enough to get him over the top. And this was his first run as a candidate on this side of the river. He spent a good part of his adult life over in the Stonington area, and now he's in Old Lyme.
Right.
So he's the new kid on the block, and it's not easy to run in general, and it's even more challenging when you're the new guy and nobody knows you. You've got to start from scratch.
And and he actually, I mean, he did well. I mean, there was a significant turnout in New London. I mean, I think he did. He made a good run. And I think that, I agree with you. I don't think he had the name recognition. I don't think, Marks had, she had support and she had a ground game. I mean, she had like the union people and the working family party people, backing her. And I saw yesterday at the polling stations, I saw somebody waving a Nolan sign, and I saw people waving a Mark sign. I didn't really see. I don't remember seeing anybody waving any Courtney signs. I was waving a Mastriani sign, a lot when I was out there. But at Harbor School, where I spent, the most time yesterday, I didn't even see. There weren't even that many sign wavers. I mean, it was like 11 o'clock, 11:30, quarter to 12, and usually you have a bunch of people out there.
Certainly, it's funny. It was the municipal elections where you tend to see a lot more of that. I don't know why, but you do. But that's the other thing too. Is now yesterday I had the opportunity, thanks to Mr. Pirro, because he's as a registrar, he hires the poll workers, and he's the last 4 or 5 years he's had me working in different capacities on election day. And on election day, he had me as a ballot counter at City Hall. And there was over 3,000 of the early votes.
Right.
And I don't know, 400 or 500 absentees. And there were 6 of us, 3 Democrats and 3 Republicans, who were opening things and making sure everybody's on the up and up. And marking things, counting things, double checking things. That's before you put them in through the tabulator. Right. And then they go through the tabulator and get counted. But that was a chore. We congregated at about 8:30, quarter to 9 in the morning, and we didn't get out of there until after midnight.
It doesn't surprise me.
And that's a long day, and I'm generally asleep by 9.
Yeah, I think the last tape I saw from Rob, Rob Perro, was, I want to say maybe 11 o'clock, 11:30 maybe. I could be wrong.
Yeah, and then the turnout was heavy with the presidential election.
Yeah. And this was a big one. I mean, I'm glad to see that people showed up and voted. I'm glad to see that we had, 5,500. We had about 6,000 and change, 6,400 people vote in New London. What do we have, 11,000 registered voters?
I think that was roughly 50%, maybe a little under.
So, I mean, this isn't bad. I don't think we've seen a 50% turnout in New London, even in a presidential election, in a long time.
I think you're right. Certainly not at the municipal level. I mean, with municipal, we're lucky to get 15, 20%.
Yeah. Which kind of like brings us to, if there are upset Republicans, following this program tonight and listening to this conversation, where do we go from here? And there's a lot of places we can go from here. Donald Trump demonstrated, and listen, how did states like Pennsylvania flip? I'm going to give you a name. Scott Pressler. Scott Pressler got involved in politics in 2020 as like a community sort of activist and organizer. Excuse me, I'm so sorry. And got involved in politics as a community organizer and things like that, and doing programs for the community and cleanups. He did like this voting drive and clean up the park sort of thing, and got young Republicans out there and young conservatives going into neighborhoods and cleaning up neighborhoods, picking up the trash, hauling that stuff off to the dump, and then talking to people and saying, how can we help your neighborhood? How can we help your community? We're not the evil ogres. I'm not a rich guy. And it really kind of started a movement, and Pressler was everywhere in 2024, and he was one of a number of people who, young Republicans, young conservatives who, went out there and engaged people. There's a reason why you saw a Trump experienced a 25% boost in the Latino vote from 2020 to 2024, because Latinos are trusting him. Same thing like African American men, a big boost. Oddly enough, Latino women, I think it was a 7 to 10% increase from 2020 to 2024. African American women had a bump as well. It wasn't substantial, but it was a bump. And why? Because you mentioned identity politics at the beginning of the program. And I think everybody's getting tired of that. I heard on television and streaming, a lot of like CNN people, and it's a lot of the commentators on MSNBC and CNN. And I'm sure I haven't had time to look at the day today, but I'm sure it's in the day. Kamala Harris didn't win because of misogyny. She didn't win because of racism. She didn't win because of this. She didn't win because of that. She didn't win because she had no platform. She had no policy, candidate. And she wasn't a good candidate. It's last week I was hearing, it's time to break the glass ceiling. And, fine, I'm not going to argue with that. If you give me a qualified woman, even when she was a Democrat, I would have probably considered giving Tulsi Gabbard a shot, depending upon who she was running against. And back then, she was a Democrat, and not a very moderate one to boot at one time. But I don't care what your gender is. I really don't. What I care is, what are you going to do if we trust you with this much power? We are sovereign citizens. And part of being in a republic, and I don't mean sovereign citizens and crazy, I'm going to make my own license plates and say I'm traveling and I'm not using the roads. No, sovereign citizens means that we ultimately hold the power. This is a history teacher in me, guys and gals, so hold on. We hold the power. We give our natural power, our God-given power and rights, we give them up to somebody who we trust. At one time, when Marty ran, we trusted Marty. All right? So I gave my power and said, Marty, represent me and represent me well. All right? So, you know what? If Tulsi Gabbard runs for office and she's better than whoever's running against her, I'll vote for her. If Kamala Harris was better than Donald Trump, I would have voted for her. Because I really don't care what your gender or race is. I don't. I care about results. Are you going to be a good shepherd of the power we're trusting you with?
I can't say it any better than that. I'll tell you, that's the way I feel. I mean, I look at folks that, and the cream tends to rise to the top, and that's part of the primary process, which Ms. Harris
was short-circuited.
Did not have. Ever. I mean, even when she ran initially in 2020, I mean, she was out before the first vote was cast.
Yeah.
So she was never really vetted.
No. Her campaign made a lot of mistakes. I think the Democratic Party is in disarray. And honestly, I mean, I have friends who are Democrats, and I don't hate Democrats. I mean, I really don't hate much. I don't really hate anybody, or at least I hate everybody equally, depending upon the day and how much coffee I've had. But here's the thing: it might be a good thing if the National Democratic Party is in disarray, because I really think that the party has really lost their vision. I mean, they ran a 2024 presidential campaign based purely on character assassination, and no policy.
Well, I mean, when Ms. Harris raises her hand and she says, I have what I call an opportunity economy.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as one who's got a degree in economics and one who's taught economics at the college level, I have yet to see that in a textbook.
Mm-hmm.
What does this mean? What are you talking about? And she really could not define that, other than that it sounded good.
Mm-hmm.
I'm for opportunity. Well, who's not?
Yeah, who's not? I mean, it's a nice soundbite, but I mean,
where's the policy to drive
exactly? I want a Ferrari, okay? Because Ferraris are cool. I mean, how am I going to earn one? I mean, yeah, Ferraris are cool. Go figure out a job and earn one. I mean, this could be a good thing for the Democratic Party, because it's going to really make the calmer heads reflect and try to understand what went wrong and how did we get off of the path and how can we get back on it.
And that's if the elites that are kind of driving that party right now,
or have been,
allow that to occur, to have that level of introspection, because that's going to be bruise their ego.
I think you're going to see a major shakeup in the upper levels of the Democratic National Party. I think you're going to see a lot of the old guard getting flushed down the drain. I mean, Sherrod Brown, he got bumped. I think that you're going to see what you always refer to as the squad. I think they're going to be struggling when they run for office next time around. I think you're going to see moderates prevail. And I hope to God that's right. I hope to God that when Donald Trump shows up and Mike Johnson shows up as Speaker of the House again, and we have a Republican as the President pro tempore of the Senate, I hope they're all going to sit there and say, hey, listen, you know what, Marty, you're a Democrat, but you're a smart guy and you're a reasonable guy, and we can find things we can agree with. We don't have to agree on everything. Let's work on things that we can agree with. We got common ground. Let's make it happen.
I'm anticipating now, too, that you'll see a change at the top of the Senate with Mitch McConnell. I think that he has aged out.
Oh, heavens, yeah. Do you have any idea? I don't
off the cuff. And I think it's just, everything's so brand new. I think it's going to take a little bit of time to shake out. But
if he was a little older,
I think Mitch is past his prime.
Oh, heavens, yeah. I think if he's a little older and had a little more experience, Marco Rubio would be an interesting an interesting choice. But I mean, I was actually thinking about that on the way in. You know, the Senate, the Senate's going to be, Republican, and yeah, I'm sorry, Mitch. The old guard is gone. Let's get rid of the neocons. Let's get rid of the neocons.
Yep, I agree. Well, it's been really an exciting evening and day today to reflect.
Mm-hmm.
And I really want to thank you for carving out an hour here. The day after the election, you told me you hadn't slept well, and after I got home last night, I don't know how I did, but I managed to stay awake until after the results were in and it was
Right.
called,
Mm-hmm.
and that Trump came out and spoke briefly. It was, I don't know, 2:30 in the morning or thereabouts.
Something like that.
I had a pretty short night's sleep.
Mm-hmm.
So and tomorrow morning I'm scheduled to be on Lee Elsie's program
Right.
at 6:30, and I appreciate Lee having me on to discuss what's going on politically and around New London and a variety of topics. And we always have a good chat, as I do when you come on here.
Well, thank you, Marty. I enjoy coming.
So you've been watching City Focus and the post-election. Needless to say, the GOP's in pretty good spirits here the day after, as they would like to say, and looking forward to some positive movement. And hopefully we'll get some positive fallout here shaken out into Connecticut in our little sector here in New London and Southeastern Connecticut as we move forward.
Hey, listen, if you live in New London, you're interested in what we're talking about, second Tuesday every month, Senior Center, 6:30. All are welcome. As long as you're respectful, we're an open door.
Very good. Well, on that note, I'm going to say thank you for coming in.
Thank you, Marty.
It's been terrific. You've been watching City Focus.